What's going on, Tamers? Right off the bat, let me level with you. I am having the worst allergy attack of my life. My fall allergies are slaughtering me right now. That being said, this is probably going to be the most jump cutty, sneeze-infused video of all time, and I apologize for both those things. Crisis averted. We are now in our third week of the BT15 Exceed Apocalypse set, and while the restricted list has been announced, it does not go into effect until October 27th, which is actually later the end of this week as of recording. That being said, I'm going to do my best to focus on decks that don't have the restricted cards in them, or have been updated to avoid the restricted cards in the respective lists. And then once the restriction list is in effect, we'll take a look at those decks that were affected and see how they've been updated. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some event results, a couple of key takeaways, and a close look at some of the decks that topped over the course of the past week. Surprise, surprise, Apocalymon is still clapping everybody's cheeks right now. It's funny to note that Apocalymon has not had a decrease in wins since it's come out 3 weeks ago. And where in the first 2 weeks it was winning by about a 30% margin over the next best deck, which is Garurumon, at this point it's almost double the Garurumon wins for the week. Slipping down past those two is Anubismon as well as Finnerlugomon. Decks that were once alongside them have started to fall in play. I'm assuming those people have just migrated over to Apocalymon. Some cool things to see here are BloomQuartz. Bloomlord and some of the vegetation cards got support with the new Palmon and Togemon X antibody cards this set, and so we'll see a list later on that infuses some of those cards into the deck. Alongside decks like that are Beelstar and Fanglongmon. I'm still kicking myself. I cannot believe week 1 I pulled alt arts of Grace Nova and Fanglongmon, and I traded in the Fanglongmon and kept the Grace Nova. What a huge L, man. On the flip side, though, talking about W's, Gamamon here is doing particularly well for itself, for reasons I'm not quite sure of. Gamamon is actually pretty popular in the Philippines. I think half the wins were actually from the Philippines this past week. If you're out there and you know why this is the case, please let me know down in the comments below, because I'd love to find out. And then as we drop down to the rookie level, it's decks that have pretty much occupied this spot for the past couple of weeks or months. Things like Leviamon, Mirage Galgamon, which I assume is going to see a fall after the restricted list goes into effect. Things like Alter S are a little bit surprising. Alter S did get support with the new Omekamon in the BT15 set, so we'll take a look at that later as well. Just a note, you see the Digipolice Oriumon right here, and then lower down on the in-training level, you see the Digipolice Commandramon. I've separated these two out where if you're running like the BT15 Digipolice cards and the BT14 stuff, then I'm going to just count it as Digipolice, and then if you're running D-Brigade stuff, it's just going to be this symbol here. So this is D-Brigade, and this is Digipolice. Alongside things like Wargreymon and Security Control, and then rounding out the bottom here with things like Chaosdramon, Gallantmon, which I felt like had a good matchup into Apocalymon, but it just hasn't been the case, as well as Vaccine Yellow. So the first deck we're going to take a closer look at is going to be the Alter S deck that we talked about before. So the build for this one is actually pretty interesting. It uses some of the lower level Agumon X antibody cards to search out one of your Greymon named cards, as well as your Black Tamer, which in this case is always going to be the Izzy. On the subject of Tamers, keep in mind this one does not run any copies of the Red and Blue, Matte, and Tai Tamers, which means you're going for the speed and reliability of a mono black deck using things like the Memory Boost as well as the training cards. The rest of the list is pretty standard. The level 4s here, they don't run any copies of the Greymon unless you just play a Tamer out for free, but they do run a couple copies of the Omekamon instead. Omekamon here kind of acting like a wild card. On play, you can Digicross him with virtually any card in the deck, and you can reduce his cost. At the same time, he can start off the chain of events to start Digivolving your other Digimon on board, much like the Agumon and Gabumon cards do. He also has some nice disruption effects that could be useful, things like Blocker, as well as an inheritance he has de-Digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon one stage. I think the last important thing to note about this deck is that it only runs 1 copy of Alter B and 4 copies of Alter S. I think most lists that we've seen typically run a 3-2 split where we've got 3 Alter S's and 2 Alter B's, but in this case, they seem a lot more focused on the Alter S for the line. I don't know about you folks out there, but as far as the EX decks have been concerned, this is probably one of my favorite ones. There's just something about the dopamine hit of actually being able to get the chain Digivolve off of both sides to get into your Alter S in one turn. Alright, jump cut after about 14 sneezes here. What I really want to say is that this is one of those decks that makes you just feel really good playing, and once it actually works, it feels very powerful. If you haven't ever tried this deck, I definitely recommend just giving it a shot for fun. Alright, so the next list we're going to look at is going to be Apocalymon, but this one does not have any of the restricted cards in it. In fact, it's a really interesting, I think, mirror deck that's focused on fighting other Apocalymons, and it does it with some pretty interesting tech. Let's take a look. Counter choices in this deck are really interesting. For example, even starting at the Digi-Egg, instead of something like the Demi-Merimon that we normally see at the level 2s, instead we see Kapurimon, who can let you ditch a card from hand and then destroy one of your opponent's level 3 Digimon. This is a fantastic answer for getting rid of your opponent's Psychemon so you can actually get your Apocalymon down. A card that synergizes really well with the Kaputimon in this deck is actually the BT14 Goblymon, who has the inheritance effect of whenever you trash a card from hand by your own effect, you can gain a memory. And so once you get to your Garurumon, you have this perfect counter for your opponent's Floodgates by using the Kaputimon, Goblymon, and Garurumon all to just destroy a card and gain memory off of it. Another interesting tech choice in this deck are the 2 copies of the Were Garurumon Ace, being able to provide some pretty balanced support here. It lets you stop one of your opponent's Digimon or Tamers from suspending, which is good in case when your opponent's Digimon are trying to run in so they can get an own deletion effect to trash more cards from their hand. In this case, they get frozen, they can't do anything, and you can pull ahead. Additionally, at 7k DP, this is actually pretty useful for just running in and kind of hoping to die. If you've got the perfect stack where you've got the Metal Garurumon X Antibody underneath, you can run this guy in, and then if he does get destroyed from a security check or there's a big Digimon on the board, you can slot 2 Digimon from your trash up onto your deck, and that way you can sustain a little bit longer against a fellow Apocalymon. Most Apocalymon decks run 4 copies of the 1-cost purple option Deathclaw, but this deck has decided to go with the card Pandemonium Flame instead, just because it provides you a little bit more flexibility, albeit at the cost of 1 more memory. Instead of only being able to destroy a level 4 or lower Digimon, in this case, you can choose a Digimon of the same level as the one you deleted and delete one of your opponent's Digimon of the same or lower level. And so while I don't think this is going to be the norm for Apocalymon after the restricted list update, I do think it's an interesting pick to fight against the mirror, as well as just another take of the deck that doesn't actually use any of the restricted cards. And this last list we're going to take a look at today is going to be this BloomQuartz list that is basking in the sun. I mean, look at that glare, holy crap. For your sake, I was kind enough to squint at cards for about 30 minutes so I could figure out what they are, and I actually rebuilt the deck in a more readable format here. So let me just hide this, and yeah, this is the actual deck that we just saw on that other page. Like I mentioned in the results and takeaway section, this deck does focus on the Palmon line a bit more than we've seen before, where we see a couple copies of the Searcher Palmon as well as 2 copies of the BT14 one, who lets you gain memory whenever an opponent's Digimon rests. And then we've also got a couple copies of the new BT15 Palmon X Antibody, who can just on play rest an opponent's Digimon. Start of the main phase, you just give something the memory effect, and then right after that, just Digivolve it right into the Palmon X Antibody to get the memory immediately for 0. The level 4 spread is just focused on utility with a couple copies of things like the BT10 Sunflowermon to play other Digimon to get effects, as well as the newer BT13 Sunflowermon to be able to Digivolve for pretty cheap by resting some of your Digimon, and then also a couple copies of the Togemon from BT14 who lets you just rest one of your Digimon and you can play a Tamer at cost -3. Keep in mind this deck only runs Mimi Tamers with a couple copies of the new Mimi Tamer who lets you search as well as gain a memory whenever a Digimon suspends, and then a couple copies of the older Mimi Tamer just so you can keep that pressure going turn after turn from the raising area. What I like about the top end of this deck is that it's built flexibly to fight against most things, including Apocalymon right now. Where at the top end we see the pretty common 3-2-1 split of things like Bloomlord, as well as Quantumon, and then the Hydramon here. But alongside Quartzmon at level 7s, we also see a couple copies of the Omnimon Merciful mode. And while he would be pretty expensive to Digivolve normally, because you have so many ways to gain memory in this deck or just reduce the cost of your Digivolves, it's not that bad. I mean, just taking a look at the Palmon here, you get the effect to rest something and then gain 2 memory, as well as an inheritance, you've got the cost -1 Digivolve if you got a green Tamer on the board. Same for the Togemon here, and then you've also got the Sunflowermon who also gives you cost -1 if you have a green Tamer in play. Additionally, you have the tried and true Hidden Potential Discovered card here to give something cost -5 whenever you Digivolve by resting something. And while you have this on the board, if you play this and you have a Mimi Tamer as well, then you can rest the Mimi Tamer because you suspend it by an effect and then get the +1 memory, so it essentially is a 0-cost Digivolve to your level 7. Actually, last night I was trying this deck out a little bit, but I was more focused on the Rosemon line, and while Rosemon X Antibody was cool, I felt like it wasn't powerful enough at the top end, so I might actually swap out to the top end here because I like the way this looks. Alright, so after about 30-something sneezes, about 40,000 jump cuts, we're finally going to bring this one to a close. Keep in mind, we're not going to see the restricted list effects for at least 2 more weeks, but that being said, let me know what decks you guys are interested in seeing after the restricted list goes into effect in the comments below. Also, I just want to give a big shout out to the members who are actually supporting the channel. I do appreciate you guys. For folks who don't know, I've started up memberships for the channel, and the current biggest perk I have right now is that they're going to be receiving these videos a little bit earlier than everybody else. But I am thinking about some more ways to get back to those folks. If you folks have any ideas about what I could do for membership perks, please let me know down in the comments below because I'd love to take your guys' ideas into account. Anyways, folks, I'm about to get out of here, go sneeze for about 8 more hours. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.